While Europe and the US are mired in economic turmoil, the IMF has upgraded its growth expectations for oil exporting countries in the Middle East and North Africa. Here to shed some light how this affects the region's economy is Standard & Chartered Bank's senior economist, Philippe Dauba-Pantanacce. Philippe, welcome to INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you very much.
The United Arab Emirates has experienced greater growth in the last 18 to 24 months than it has in decades. How much of this is due to the oil price, and is it typical of oil-producing countries in the region?
Obviously, the higher oil prices have had an impact in terms of the general revenues that the GCC have benefited from in the recent years. But the second element certainly is that in the recent month, with the destabilization in the region, we have seen some oil producers that had to withdraw from the global oil market, and the GCC had to step in to make up for the shortfall. So the combination of higher oil prices that is linked also to the oil risk premium, I would say, and the higher oil production is definitely the winning combination for every oil producer countries.
The IMF has upgraded its 2012 forecast for MENA's oil-producing countries from 4.8 to 6.6%. With strong oil prices set to continue, how much of this benefit will flow through to non-oil producing countries? And are we going to see a widening gap between the haves and the haves-not in the region?
Obviously, having higher oil prices and higher oil production will foster an environment of investment spree from the GCC countries, and hopefully the non-oil producer countries in the region will benefit from that. We're gonna see in 2012 quite a massive difference and a massive gap in terms of real GDP growth between the oil producer countries and the oil exporter countries. But one of the reasons for that is that oil exporter countries, or I'm sorry, oil importer countries have gone through, some of them have gone through a political transition, and this has led to economic disruption, disruption in all activity basically, whether being economic or even institutional. So these countries are going to underperform this year. But as we go into next year and the year after that, we're going to see that the growth potential of a lot of the oil importer countries is gonna come back to trend, and arguably for some of them, if you think about Tunisia, it is estimated that in the new environment, the country could actually grow on trend at a much higher growth path than it used to be. So in fact, we could see a sort of a catching up from the oil importer countries toward the oil exporter countries, or at least a narrowing of the gap between them.
What impact do you think this will have on the stability of the region?
Well, I think that for a lot of these countries, there's still a lot of uncertainty. And here I want to think especially in terms of the institutional environment. But I do think also that we have passed a lot of steps in the political transition, especially in Egypt and in Tunisia. It's difficult to say that the roadmap will be completely clear and that we know exactly where we're going, but I think that the most acute phase of the crisis is really behind us. And typically, if you look at Egypt, I think that you have a lot of investors that are more and more reassured by the way things are turning. Now, in terms of opportunities for foreign investors, actually I think that they are tremendous, both for a huge country like Egypt, but also for a small country like Tunisia. If you take Tunisia, there's been various estimates and studies that have shown that Tunisia could grow in terms of growth potential and growth trend maybe 2 or 3 percentage points higher than during the Ben Ali years. And the reason for that is that once you get rid of a lot of what we could call the inefficiencies of the economy, and here you want to think about cronyism, about confiscation of assets, you're going to think about corruption. If you past that, and if you really set yourself in an environment that is much more conducive to growth, then you could definitely actually increase not only the growth in 1 or 2 years, but the growth potential for that given country.
How has the business environment changed?
Well, I think that right now, in terms of business environment, it is still more of a wait-and-see period. And for that, I think that if we think about countries such as, again, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, some investors, are trying to see where the regulatory environment will be going in terms, of competition laws, in terms of openness to foreign investment, and how also the old regulatory system might be changed. I think that in certain instances, the regulatory environment is still putting off a lot of investors. But it is very important also to state that it has improved a lot. And in fact, if you look at certain examples such as Dubai and how Dubai has gone through one of its biggest crises in the recent years, especially in the real estate following the 2008 financial crisis, I think that they have addressed a lot of the regulatory challenges and have strengthened, beefed up, the regulatory environment, the transparency, the governance, all the elements that are once again conducive to fostering a healthy investment environment for foreign investors. So there have been some lessons that have been learned, but I do think that going forward, there's still a lot of work to be done.
So far, the GCC countries have been able to use their oil money to buy some stability. But from a global point of view, are they still considered an investment risk?
Well, for a lot of investors, the whole region is still a geopolitical risk for sure. If you speak with investors, especially the ones who are not so maybe educated or so trained maybe in the region, they do see the region as a whole as a region where the geopolitical risk is still very high and where there's still a lot of uncertainty. And I think the problem for countries like the GCC is that sometimes, despite their domestic stability, they are engulfed into that picture where the MENA region is still a very unstable one.
What role is China expected to play in the Middle East and North Africa over the next decade?
China is actually already playing and will continue to play a crucial role for the GCC and the MENA at large. I think that for oil exporter countries, obviously the biggest reason for that is that now the GCC export more oil to Asia than to anywhere in the world. And China is the main component of that. So really, in terms of oil production and the level of the oil production, which is absolutely crucial, is the main determinant of GDP growth. The level of imports from China, hence the growth of China, will be really the key for the upcoming development of the GCCs.
Philippe, thanks for being with us on INSEAD Knowledge.
It was a pleasure.